miracles is in the type of Eucharistic miracle. We always hear, well, it's a Eucharistic miracle, but there's different types. Some where the image appears, others where the host bleeds, others where the host miraculously is transported somewhere. Let's start by ones that emit bright light. That is a famous example of a Eucharistic miracle. All right. With some of the Eucharistic miracles, as I just said, you'll see from the host, either with people there or not, a great light coming from the Eucharist. In 1247, this was in Santarém, Portugal, there was a woman who was concerned about her husband not being faithful. So she went to a sorceress, a witch, don't do that, all right, and said to her the problem. Now this witch said, I can help you, but I need you to bring me a consecrated host from a Catholic church. We'll talk more about Satanists and witches and consecrated hosts in a minute. The woman put it in her kerchief there, and the cloth, when she started to take it home, became blood-stained. It began to bleed. Now this frightened her. So what she did is she hid it, this cloth in the host inside the cloth. She hid it in a drawer in her bedroom. Okay? And that night she's in the room with her husband, and the drawer started glowing. This, like if you put a big bright light inside a drawer, you know how it just emanates out. And so anyway, when her husband saw it, she confessed. So she broke down, she confessed what was going on. So anyway, this bright light became so bright that people around the area saw it coming out of the bedroom windows. And so this bright light drew many people. And so these townspeople came to the house attracted by this light. Now the priest took the host, so the priest was even notified, and he came there, and he took the host back to the church and put it in a wax container. Now it bled for 3 days in this wax container. Now they left that host, remained in this wax container for 4 years. They had a little different way of treating hosts back then. So one day after 4 years, the priest opened the tabernacle door. This is where they kept it. And he saw that the wax had been shattered and broken into numerous pieces. So what happened was, in its place was a crystal container in the middle of the tabernacle, and the blood had all been collected inside that crystal container. Now that blood in this whole miracle, let's look at our slide, can be viewed. This is the Santarém, Portugal miracle of 1247. Now this host is still viewable in this reliquary at the church. I was there. I got to go up. You actually go behind. You walk up a set of stairs. You go behind it, and you can see this reliquary, a very powerful reliquary, miracle. And so I was actually there to see it. This is a great story of an example of the bright light. This is very well documented. Now, a similar type story took place in the 1300s, not long after this miracle, in the Polish village of Wawel near Krakow, Poland. Now, we Marians, St. Faustina, are tied to Poland. So this is why I wanted to talk about this one. It's amazing what happened. Thieves, they broke into a church and stole a monstrance containing consecrated hosts. They didn't care about the hosts. They thought the monstrance was made of gold. So once they determined the monstrance was not made of gold, they threw the whole thing into a marsh with the consecrated hosts. Now, that night, a super bright light emanated again, shot out of the marsh, and from the exact spot where the consecrated hosts were. Now, the light was visible, get this, for several miles. That's kind of like the baby Jesus, right? Where the star brought the wise men or the shepherds. So anyway, this light was visible from several miles away, and it frightened the villagers. So of course they went to the bishop. Back in those days, people went to the church when they were troubled. Now, the bishop called for 3 days of fasting and prayer. Then on the third day, sound familiar, he led a procession to where the source of that light was coming. So after 3 days, they showed up at the light, and there they found the monstrance and all the consecrated hosts. Here's a picture of it. This is just a drawing, but let's look at our next slide. This is from the miracle of Wawel near Krakow, Poland in the 1300s. But the consecrated host had been submerged for 3 days and didn't soak up. I mean, how do you put bread in water for 3 days and have it completely untouched? This, again, is all documented. What I'm giving you are all approved. These are not just people making up a story. These have been church investigated, church approved. So you know these stories are not just somebody saying these things happened. These were all investigated and approved by the church. Now, here's another type of miracle. The face of Christ on the host. Now, I have not given this talk publicly. I gave this talk just last week privately to the Holy Face Ministry in Buffalo, New York. And they actually have witnessed Christ's face appearing on a host in multiple occasions. And so I wanted to talk about this one when I gave this talk to them a couple weeks ago, a private talk, because this is one that really, I think, starts to get us into the realm of wow. What happened? All right, in some Eucharistic miracles, as I said, the actual face or the image of Christ appears right on the host. And you know what? I could give you many examples of old ones. I'm going to jump right into recent, 21st century. On April 28th, 2001, in Trivandrum, India. So we're talking just 20 years ago. A Father Johnson Karor was saying Mass when he saw 3 dots appear on the consecrated host, taking it to mean the Trinity. Now he asked the faithful to remain in prayer, and he placed this Holy Eucharist in the tabernacle. Now, a week later, on May 5th, this same priest put that host out for adoration. When they did, here's what they noticed. Let's show our next slide. That's the actual picture of the host. Wow, this time it actually had a human face. And so during adoration, this image became clearer and clearer. And again, this is one fully approved by the church. Not made up by people with drawings. They've analyzed the host. They've analyzed the image. It's not a drawing. It's a miracle. And so these are the reasons God gives us to strengthen our faith. Now, another way he gives us is through water. Have you ever heard of a Eucharistic miracle involving water? I'm going to give you 2 great ones. All right. A different type of Eucharistic miracle was recorded. Now, this is the one in the 6th century that I was talking earlier about. The other one was actually before that. That was the first one, the miracle I opened up with about the Desert Fathers was even earlier. Now we're talking 6th century in the Holy Land, around Palestine. There was a saint called Saint Zosimus, Zosimus, Saint Zosimus of Palestine. Now, the miracle, however, involves Saint Mary of Egypt, who left her parents. Now, if you are struggling with sexual temptations or promiscuity or infidelity, she's the saint to turn to. Saint Mary of Egypt. You know why? At 12 years old, she became a prostitute. Now, that means there's hope for all of us, right? So she became a prostitute. 17 years later, somehow, she ended up in Palestine, near the Holy Land. And it was on the feast of the exaltation of the cross when she went to church, looking, believe it or not, for customers. Now, man has been broken for all history. So when this young woman goes looking for prostitute customers at the church, wow, you know we're broken. So anyway, she went there, goes to this church looking for customers as a prostitute, and she saw an image of Mary. And the reports are that that image became alive. You ever look at an image and you almost swear you saw the eyes move? Yeah. So anyway, she saw this image of Mary and was overcome with remorse so much that she begged forgiveness on the spot. And she asked for Mary's help. So she's asking God for forgiveness, Mary for help, and a voice came clear to her. If you cross the Jordan River, because she was near there, you will find peace. Now this is why, because the biblical, the Jews crossing the Jordan River, get to the promised land. All right, so she did this. She went and took up a life, crossed the Jordan, and began the life of a hermit. And she lived alone in the desert for 47 years. Again, this is Saint Mary of Egypt. Now, for 47 years. Now, one day she saw a monk. This is back to Saint Zosimus. So Saint Zosimus shows up there in the desert where she was. He had come there for Lent. This is why we go to the desert. Why do you go to the desert? That's where you battle Satan. Why? Satan's afraid of water. Evil doesn't like to cross water. The evil spirits want the desert. So the church fathers used to go into the desert to confront the devil. That's why Jesus went into the desert for 40 days. It was to confront the evil. So the tradition has always been that's where the evil spirits really thrive. Now, what happened was they saw each other and they spoke for a while. And at the end of the conversation, St. Mary of Egypt asked Zosimus to come back the following year to bring her Holy Communion this time. She had been without Holy Communion. She was alone. She's also an inspiration if you're not able to receive the Eucharist today because your church is closed or something like, you're quarantined and you can't receive. Pray to St. Mary of Egypt. Now, Zosimus did as she requested, but Mary, when he came back, was on the other side of the Jordan River. Now, there was no boat this time for him to cross. First time he had a boat. Now there was no boat. And he thought, there's no boat anywhere. How am I going to get across the Jordan River? I can't do this. It will be impossible. Well, let's look at our next slide. This is a drawing of Saint Mary of Egypt from the 6th century. What she did is she made a sign of the cross and walked across the river. She walked literally on the water, again documented by Saint Zosimus. And he gave her Holy Communion. Now she asked him again to come back the next year. But when he did, he found this time she was dead. So now what happened? Well, next to her corpse was a note left for him. And it said, please bury my remains. Well, what was fascinating is this is the desert. He didn't have any tools or whatever. And all of a sudden, a lion, I would imagine an Asiatic lion, these are the desert lions. And a lion shows up and actually dug her grave. You know, it has always been told by the saints how God communicates with animals. You saw that video I just showed. There's a little section in there that talks about how God communicates with animals. That donkey actually genuflected before the Eucharist, even though it was starving. Now, let's keep on this theme of water, and I want to tell you about my favorite Eucharistic miracle of them all. This one is my favorite. I'm a water guy. I used to love boating. I love fishing, and this is another water miracle, but it happened in France. Now, this is my favorite. It took place in Avignon, France, in November of 1433. What happened was there was a small church run by the Franciscans that had adoration, but some great rains came, torrential rains, and flooded the whole area. And the whole area water was above what people could protect their homes. Now, 2 friars came by boat. They rowed the boat, certain that this little church was going to be destroyed. Now, when they got there, there was water 4 feet deep, all the way around the church, 4 feet high. But there was a pathway from the doorway to the altar that was perfectly dry, and the sacred host was untouched. Now, what I'm about to show you is an actual drawing, because this was in 1433. So we actually have the actual drawing from one of these monks. Here it is. The next slide. That's the actual drawing. Look at that. The water is 4 foot high on the sides. This is like the Red Sea. This is like the Lord parting the waters of the Red Sea to get them to the promised land, the Holy Eucharist, right? And so here's the drawing of the water 4 feet deep. The water had been held back, literally, because I said, the same way with Moses in the Red Sea. And this was verified. They actually verified it. The church approved it. Incredible. That's my favorite one. All right, so let's